Welcome to the Journey 2020. Charles Morse, happy to be here with you coming off the weekend. Um, Understanding that, here in Florida, there might be a little cold snap coming, which um, I love. But it, we going to have a little discussion about this because my guest, but I have to laugh. But did your team win the Super Bowl, people? Um, it's funny because I went to a party. It was kind of unusual. Oh, very nice party, by the way. I called up my brother, and I hadn't talked to him in a while, and he's back and forth between um, Jacksonville and here. And so he said, yeah, because his family's still there, but he works out of Jacksonville now. So I said, where you watching the Super Bowl? He said, oh, I'm going to a friend's house, and this guy, I'd never met him before, but evidently he told me they've been friends for years. And so what was unusual about the party was that all of the parties that I had gone to, it's usually a 60-40, 50-50, but it was about a 85-15, and 85% of the people that was there, I would say like 90% of the people there were like Philly fans. So that was kind of weird. So usually because in a Super Bowl party, you always like the one team against the other team and how they sit there and talk smack to each other, go back and forth. But it was interesting, and I know a lot of people that are very happy now. My cousin, who I'm very close to, used to work in Philly, so all the well, congratulations to the Philly fans. But anyway, so hope everybody's well. I'm Charles Morris. This is the Journey 2020. Well, we've been coming to you since 2013, and as my co-host used to say, from me to you and from you to me, the journey, so we can try to reach a high level. People been talking and asking me, texting me on WhatsApp, people and so on and so forth about my show that I did with Miss Sharon Driver. And they said, well, when you going to do the part two? You say you're going to do a part two. Um, and so guess what? Miss Driver decided to join me today, and we're going to do part two. And we're going to kind of do a little catch up. And for those who didn't watch the show, the first show, we're going to have Miss Driver come on, and I just want to say, um, sorry that your team didn't win the Super Bowl.
No, they didn't.
But more importantly, you was around some rough people, huh? But that's how
Oh,
those
yeah,
Philly people are. You know that, right?
yeah. I learned.
Yeah. So, yeah, man. For people out there, Philly is really like a rough town. I mean, like New York, but Philly fans, there's just something about those Philly fans that just like really, anybody that like kind of like beat up on Santa Claus, you a rough fan. Throw batteries at So it's Philly is like some crazy fans, but yeah, yeah, yeah. Philly known for just like being rough. So, but how how have you been?
I've been good. I've been busy, just busy.
Busy, busy. Well,
And
listen.
busy is good.
Yeah. Well, people um saw the show, and I had a great deal of response from a lot of people,
Okay.
and they wanted to hear more about your story. So, won't you just kind of? I'm going to ask you to just for those who didn't see the show, who's seeing this for the first time, just just start off with just telling us about who Sharon is.
Well, my name is, I'm happy to be on the show for part two. My name is Sharon Driver. And I'm just going to reiterate on some of the things that we talked about in the first show.
Hmm.
First thing, I was molested as a child, so that started my childhood spiraling out of control. Um, Over a period of time, that childhood sexual trauma developed into other things that allowed me to not function on a normal level. Life just turned upside down pretty much. And I was just all over the place. As my daughter would like to say, Mom, you're squirreling. And so that started me out having a rough childhood, growing up as an adolescent, being very rebellious, in and out of the juvenile system, foster care, foster homes. Um, just life turned upside down. I think where we were in the first show, we ended it because it was a lot to cover. And I think what people want to know is where I'm at now in my life. And so just think about being molested from the ages of 10 to 13 years old, having a child from that molestation. Um, yes,
Well,
me and my, go ahead.
no, no, I was going to say, even for myself, honestly, I was trying to phantom, just understanding the mindset of a 14-year-old. Well,
Hmm.
you know, uh, thir 13, 14.
Hmm.
Um, I'm going to share. uh, yeah, I probably shouldn't. I probably shouldn't say this, but when I was 14 years old, I had a girlfriend, and I look back, and she was 12. And now that I think about it, and I look and I see these little 12-year-old girls. I mean, this is coming up during the years. When
Hmm.
when you're an adult and you look back and you see 12-year-old girls, and you're like, oh my gosh, she was just a little baby,
That's right.
right?
You better say it.
Right. And so, but when I'm 14 and she's 12, and because she loved herself some Charles, but she was crazy about some Charles, and she was this little sweet little 12-year-old girl. And so, as you was telling the story, I was reflecting back on being that age and what was life like, and how did you see the world, and all of that, and just the results of understanding good, bad, or indifferent, what comes from your childhood and how
Hmm.
that molds and shape you, you
Into
know,
your adulthood.
well, through life. Yeah,
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 period. That's
yeah,
right. Hmm.
yeah, because generally, um, under the circumstances and situations, people always act. I mean, let's just say, and I was going to say something else, but let's just say, whenever something happens in a person's life and they're in the courtroom, they always come back to, well, this is what happened in their childhood. This is what happened in their childhood, and blah, blah, blah. Because sometimes, like, for an example, I was watching, because I love watching the IID channel. And I also love watching American Greed.
Hmm.
And so an example is, I was watching the American Greed the other day, and there was a family who whole life, the majority of their life, was stealing, and they were very, very good at it, and was
Hmm.
living a very like nice life. They had became so good at it that when they were showing the videotape and how the mother was, and how they made their money was, they would go and they were stealing toys, and they and they went and talked to the guy who bought from them, but the guy didn't know that they were the thieves that they were.
Hmm.
And he basically, they was living in like a $1 million house, but
Wow.
they had a 23-year-old daughter. And so when they finally got caught, one of the things that they tried to use as her defense was saying she was influenced by their parents, because that's all she had ever known.
Hmm.
They I mean, she was 23, and she didn't get as many years as the parents. When I tell you they were stealing for years, they were stealing for years. But my whole point was, that was the thing. She was brought up in this environment and how that affected her, and so on and so forth, and it plays a major part. So, and people ask me, people say so, and I think we did cover this. The
Mm-hmm.
part that you didn't say was that the your mother's boyfriend got the both of you pregnant at the same time,
Yes.
and then they asked, well, were they brothers, or uncle brother? Did they grow up in the same house? So tell us what that was like. Uh,
Okay.
the the two brothers, uncle brother. What was that like, and how did they see each other? How do they see each other to this day?
And that's a very good point. I'm glad you brought that up because that is critical. So yes, my son was born in August. My mother's son was born in December. So who knew other than me, my mother, and the perpetrator? Other family members knew, but no one ever said anything. Growing up in Mississippi, as you always know, everything was swept up under the rug. Nobody wanted to talk about anything. And that was one of the major problems of me growing up. Nobody wanted to get me any help because nobody wanted to face, the fact of what really happened. And so, yes, they did grow up in the same houses. But it wasn't until later in life that I exposed everything. I was probably well into my late 40s, by the time the question really came up from my children as to who my oldest son's father was. So my three adult children started talking amongst themselves. And that's how the truth came out, to be so to speak. But yes, they grew up as uncle and nephew to later find out that they're actually real brothers. I'm talking about blood brothers.
Right,
And so that was a turn of events for not just for them, but for my mother also, who kept the lie covered up for so many years. And so, and that was rough because then that made things turn, me and my mother's relationship looked at differently. And I think for me, I felt a sigh of relief because the truth was now out. But more importantly, I was angry also that I had kept your secret, but you'd lied on me as to how this thing all transpired. And not believing your daughters when we come to you to let you know what was happening or what was going on in our lives, but then to continue to fabricate the story that he had you to believe. And so I think for my son and my brother, that was the
right,
straw that broke the camel's back, you know.
right. I, I don't have the level in which. No, no, no. I'm saying because, and I'm not going to try to compare the two. I'm not. And so please, people out there, don't think that I'm trying to compare my issue with hers. But on my little minor issue as a child, growing up in a household where my mother had four kids in a marriage, and then she got a divorce, and then she had me. So with my little issues with my siblings, like this right here, where my mother to me as a little child always favored them. It, so it was a bit confusing for me because I didn't understand. And what I mean by that is, no, this is something totally different. What I mean by that is like my youngest sister are, if any of them, now this is a child's world. If I'm watching television and my sister would just come in and change the channel, and you go, "Mama," and she would always favor them. Like I couldn't get the channel back, and just little stuff like that. And as a little child, you're kind of confused because you don't understand.
That's
So
right.
now you're on a whole nother level of stuff, and
Mm.
and I'm and again, when I keep saying I'm trying to phantom a 14-year-old child in that world, and I just can't do it because um and 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 then the other thing too is one of the guys that I know that comes on the show, um, he is a counselor,
Mm-hmm.
and when he saw the show, he said, "Charles, I've I've had four people that I've counseled and counseling under the same situation, the exact same thing that your show was about." And then he kind of went to a place of saying, well, the era in which we grew up, because we basically the same age, he said that is a more common thing than we want to admit to.
That's right.
Right, because he said it is swept under the rug. It wasn't talked about, but it happened a lot. And it's like, wow. And
Mm-hmm.
also, one of the things that I used to do, and I have to laugh so people don't laugh at me when I tell you the story. Uh, for over a period of a year, I had Kathy, who the my co-host, who's a clinical psychologist, out of his office. One of his associates used to be a co-host. She used to do the third week every month for over a year. And so, her being a counselor, uh, she called me and said, "Charles, I want you to take part in something." And mind you, when I said don't laugh, because I was the only male. And so she had these women on, and I called and had a couple of my friends join in. And so every Friday we would have a little session where they would talk. Now they're in counseling and would talk about some of the issues and problems. And I'm the only male giving the male perspective on these things.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say, in listening to all of this that was going on, I would always say it's amazing the things we have to come up out of. It
That's
is
right.
absolutely amazing because this person with this experience, this person with that experience, this person had to deal with this person had to deal with that. And I had one person who, to this day, when she tells a story from her childhood, I just sit there and shake my head and I say, God just had his hand on you, sweetheart. He really did.
Me too.
Right. And she said, you know what, Charles? When after I heard her, one of the girls on the story, she said, Charles, after I heard this girl's story, and the girl, after she told her story, after she smelled a certain perfume, it takes her back to her childhood and all the stuff that she had to come up out of. And she said to me, she said, Lord have mercy. She said, after I heard her story, and this perfume thing, she said, I think my childhood was kind of nice.
Yeah.
When you hear all this stuff, and I know her childhood, and I still look at her sometimes and just shake my head like, wow, knowing
Right.
what I know about her, you, you know. But as a 14-year-old, and you were saying that you were starting to steal, you were starting. How did you? How does a 14-year-old deal with this stuff? How was you dealing with that?
I wasn't. That's the problem. I didn't have an opportunity to deal with any of it. I was bounced around from detention centers, from running away. Um, especially after having a baby, I was placed in foster care because then it opened up a big investigation. Needless to say, long story short, he went to prison. Um, and I was just left out there in foster care with total strangers. And I thank God to this day that I had a good foster family, though. The Paytons were very good to me, and I was taught a lot. However, once I finished my time in foster care, I was placed back in my mother's home. By
Well,
the time I was, I would say, 16. Hmm.
but okay, so let's let's go back because you did say that you had that you had your grandmother, and your grandmother did believe your story
Oh yeah,
because when you went to your mother did not believe you,
that's correct.
right? So they didn't allow you to go to your grandmother.
Hmm. They didn't allow us to do anything. My childhood was totally isolated around what this man wanted to do, when he wanted to do it, and he dictated who I played with, who I talked to, all the way down to the clothes I wore. Um, just imprisoned in my mother's home, and he was the capture.
Okay.
And pretty much everything he said is what was instilled. That's
So
what we went by.
so how did that impact your mother and your relationship once it was found out, and then he went to court and he was found guilty? So how did that affect you, and how did that affect your mother and the relationship between you two?
Um, I used to always feel like my mother never loved me to begin with because of my father, my biological father. I felt like when he didn't marry her, she pretty much didn't care about me anymore, and it showed through my childhood. I was abused. I was whooped a lot. I took the punishment for anything my siblings did. I you name it. And I had other people taking care of me, like I was always put off on my aunts or other cousins, that were older. And even to this day, I'm looked at as baby girl because so many of people had a hand in trying to raise me. But for the most part, I couldn't tell. I didn't couldn't decipher what a relationship was like with a mother, what it was supposed to be like, I should say, because I didn't have one. Here I was, her eldest daughter, her oldest child, period, doing whatever I was told to do. Clean the house, cook the food, keep the kids, do whatever. So my childhood was pretty much always nurturing to someone.
Mm, wow.
Yeah.
But I was having a discussion with somebody, and I was trying to phantom what was your mother's childhood like in reference to
She
what
grew
if
up with her mother and father. She grew up with her siblings. She grew up with her mother and father, which were my grandparents.
right, right,
And so she was able to be a child, go to school. She had me at 16.
right.
So she got pregnant young, but
Well, well,
uh,
well, well, what I mean, I was trying to figure out what was a childhood like in reference to, developing her personality and her lack of
mhm,
this and her lack of that, and what was missing in her life, and where she, whatever reason, didn't value this, or the low
mhm,
self-esteem, or wherever her values came from, and because
right.
that's the trying to figure it out, like, you know,
Well,
just
she
trying to.
was the second daughter. She's the second oldest.
Hmm.
There were two siblings under her, so I have no idea. That's something,
Right,
and that's a great question because that's something that we never talked about.
right.
And my mother is not like, I'm very boisterous and um, I speak up for myself and I talk about things. That's not my mother's character. That's not her nature.
Hmm.
Um, and growing up in the South here again, you learn from your parents.
Hmm.
So my grandmother she was a different breed of woman. She was that caregiver, that nurturer, that housewife, and she worked also. But if you didn't want the people in the neighborhood to talk about you, or if you didn't want the people down the street to know your business, you didn't talk about it. And so I think that was a characteristic that my mother picked up from my grandmother. Nobody wanted to talk about anything. And I'm totally the opposite. Even to this day, I talk about everything. When I got this curse off of me and discovered my purpose in life, I'd never felt so free to be able to open my mouth and talk about my childhood trauma, talk about how I was feeling, talk about the nightmares. Talk about the seizures and um, the different relationship. Talk about the abuse. Once you let go and you start forgiving, you know that's another topic for another day, because I had to literally forgive my mother and Levi for what they did to me. And although my mother never touched me in a sexual manner, but she allowed him to have his way. And I will go to my grave believing that she knew what this man was doing to me all those years and never protected me, never said a thing, and just allowed it as though it was some form of punishment to
Well,
me.
you and I don't want to get into the psyche of your mother. Um, and it's funny because I did ask um, uh, Dr. Robinson, who used to help co-host the show, that I wanted him to be part of this show. Um, and we talked briefly, and unfortunately, he's been having some health issues here and there. But he says that he's doing better because he can kind of break down certain things because that's what he does. That's his field. But it you kind of said something that was key, and I'm not going to really talk about it, but you kind of said something that was key, I think, when it comes to your mom, how she saw you and your father, and
Hmm.
so you can kind of like, wow. Um, but then most people, um, by nature of how mothers are when it comes to their kids, that they would naturally that 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 mother instinct where it kicks in to per, protect their children. And so whatever that is, and I'm not a clinical psychologist, that's not my field. But I keep going back to you trying to come, maneuver through a child's state of mind, dealing with the hurt, dealing with the pain. And we naturally look to our parents. Because to us, our parents know everything.
That's
To
right.
to us, our parents have all the answers. To us,
Answers to
right.
everything. Hmm.
To us,
Protect
our
us, to
right,
protect us too.
we naturally think that the parents is gonna do right by us. That's just how we are.
Yeah,
And believe it or not, I've been mentoring kids for years, and one of the things that I try to help the kids understand, especially when they're a little older, they're when they're teenagers and even adults sometimes, because we still have issues with our parents. And what I try to say to them, I say, parents are just people who have babies. That don't mean that they know how to parent. And I try
that's
to,
right.
I try to explain that to them to say that, and then this is the thing that I always try to say too. I say, in our circle, in most of our circle, it works like this. There are people, there are people who actually sit down and plan out being parents and having children and do this and do that. And so when the wife get pregnant, they go, "Oh yeah, we finally made it happen." But I say in the circle that I travel in, and most of the time it's like this: I'm pregnant. What? From who?
Mm.
Who you bring? You? Are you sure? So the circle that I've traveled in be like, well, who, what? Huh? How did that happen? So it's just like, no, well, who, like, who are we gonna tell? Well,
Yeah.
at some point we can't hide it. Oh my God, oh my God, my mom gonna kill me.
As a child, I'll never forget waking up and looking down, and there's a basketball in front of me.
Right, yeah. And and yeah, I was gonna ask you.
It happened overnight. It was like, I'm a little tiny little something, and
Did
here
you?
I wake up,
Yeah,
and
did you
there
understand
it.
that when they told you that you was pregnant? Did you understand that?
I knew what being pregnant was,
Hmm.
yes, but nobody talks to you about being pregnant or things of that nature. Who talks about your child, a kid being pregnant? You didn't. We did. That wasn't a topic discussed in the house.
Hmm. Wow.
My grandson.
Uh,
So that wasn't a topic that was discussed, but yeah,
yeah, well,
that.
go back into. You say you looked down and you saw yourself, and so what was going on then? I mean,
So that's when I'm like, what's wrong with my stomach? And so it was like, what you been doing, sort of thing.
right.
Like immediately, here comes the defense mechanism. You know, um, so I go to the doctor, and here I am. I think at that point I was probably almost 5 months, 4 or 5 months pregnant.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
So
So, but I can. Uh,
that's when the running away really occurred. Yeah.
so,
So my
so.
grandparents was like, I told my grandmother, and she was like, and my grandfather too. They were adamant, okay, well, you're gonna stay right here until this baby is born and we get to the bottom of this thing. And so that's how I ended up staying with my grandparents, continuing to go to school, dealing with that embarrassment.
Wow.
The only one in school,
Wow. It's,
pregnant.
right. I can't. I keep saying trying to process all of this. Trying to process all of this.
Yeah.
So what was it like for a 14-year-old? I won't cause see, one thing that I've learned in life is that there's stuff that God has given men, and there's stuff that God has given women. I
Yeah.
don't try to cross the path. I just don't try to do that. There's stuff that is your world, and there's stuff that belongs to me. And sometimes we try to intertwine those, and it's crazy. So my question to you is, what is it like for a 14-year to go into labor? That's not my, to go into labor, whatever that is, and then you trying to process that, and now you done had a baby. What was that like?
I'll never forget. So going to school, my grandmother pretty much did everything too. So I was told that my son was a girl. So when we went to the doctor and started having the one ultrasound that you got back in those days, I was told at that time my that I was having a boy. No, I was having a girl. And so, who could be excited? Nobody but me and my grandmother. We're the only ones that knew. And so I'm living with my grandparents, and up until I go into labor, it's me and my grandmother going off to the hospital. She made the phone call, Sharon's in labor. And that morning, when she made that phone call to my mom to tell her that I was in labor, this man started changing his identity.
Oh,
Yep. He immediately started because he was getting ready to run.
mm-hmm,
Yep. I think all this time, kind of like just bought his time and stayed around because you got to keep in mind now, my mother's pregnant too.
mm,
Yep. So he already has the fabricated story, that um, this baby belongs to someone else. He ain't did nothing.
mm-hmm,
Stop it. And so, yeah. So I go into labor, and no one's in the delivery room with me other than my grandmother.
mm-hmm.
And it was the funniest thing. She's coaching me along, push, and all this and all that. Keep in mind, and we thinking I'm having a girl. And she done went out and bought all these little girl clothes, all this little cute stuff, and being really supportive of me. Lo and behold, that last push comes out a big old bouncing baby boy.
Mm.
Yes. And then the whole room changes. My grandmother's on the side of me, soothing me, telling me how well I did, because labor for me was very fast.
Mhm.
And my grandmother leans down into my ear and says, "You did good, baby girl. Good job."
Mhm.
She says, "But I got to step out for a minute. But I promise you, I'll be right back."
Mhm.
She stepped out of that room, out of that delivery room, and she went and called the police.
Oh. Mhm.
I don't know what she said, but they reacted. Because when she looked at my son,
Mhm.
we didn't need no DNA. No.
Mhm.
I could tell, when you hear that, Lord have mercy.
Mhm.
That's when I say the whole room changed. After that, Lord have mercy, baby girl, you did real good.
Mm.
But grandma got to step out for 1 minute. But I'll be back.
Mm.
I'll be back. I'm going to tell you something. I had never felt so alone in my life, right?
Mhm.
Up until the moment they laid my son up on my chest.
Mhm.
My whole life changed again. Now I'm 14 years old with a baby. So you know the term, a baby having a baby.
Right.
And that's what I was, a baby having a baby. Having to grow up in the midst of a second. Yeah. And at that point in time, my life changed to where I'm now not no longer a child, but I am a young adult because I got to grow up all the way now. Fast forward, you know,
What was that
here I
like
am.
for you though? But what was that like for a 14-year-old? As you say, you got to grow up real fast, psychologically, mentally. Be- be-
Uh,
Because you're 14. You're 14.
I don't know how to do anything.
Right.
All I knew was I had been helping my mom take care of her kids. So I knew a lot, I played with
Right.
baby dolls.
Right. Mhm. You know.
And so I knew a lot, but it wasn't enough.
Right.
And then I'm 14 years old, my body changing, I just delivered a baby, a natural birth at that.
Oh wow.
Yeah, a natural birth at that. So all kind of thoughts are going through my head. What am I gonna do? How I'm gonna care for this baby? All kind of stuff. Just everything.
Mm.
I was not prepared.
Oh well, what 14-year-old would be?
Right.
So
I was totally not prepared, and like I said, had it not been for my grandmother, just being who she was in my life, and um, ready to help me, ready to provide and help me, you know. Then here comes all the questions from detectives, the police, in the hospital.
mhm.
Yeah, here comes all of that.
Right.
This little grandbaby of mine. Now, the best thing of all of what has happened to me in my life is to the fact that I was able to bear children. I have two other kids,
Mhm.
Travis and Sharina, who I had after my oldest, and they both have blessed me with 7 grandchildren.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yes,
All right. And
that's kind of the luxury. But back to being in the hospital,
mhm.
like I said, then here comes all the detectives and, the police and asking me all these questions and having to relive that.
Right.
Go back to reliving, everything that has transpired, what I've gone through.
Mhm.
What has he done? How long has this been going on? And then, of course, they did the DNA right then. And when they went to the house, after I just basically told what had happened, what I've been going through the past few years, it didn't take them long to get on an arrest warrant, but they arrested my mom and him both.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Wow. So I keep trying to process like what was going on with your mom. And what I mean by that is, 'cause again, I'm not a woman. And I won't even try to play one on TV.
Mm.
um, what was she going through in reference to the guy that she supposedly care about in this way had impregnated her her daughter? How did she awareness enough to look at herself not protecting her daughter and deciding to be with a person with this mindset? And I'm still trying to, it's like, where did she go, and how even did she ever process it to a degree to really understand, to look past whatever it is
I,
that,
I'm,
that she
I'm,
was
I'm so
lacking?
glad that you're asking this question. Levi was very good at manipulation. He was very good. He was like the best con artist that I, I didn't even know what con artists were at that time, but he was real good. He had my mother believing his story, his fabricated story. He really had her mind just gone believing any and everything that he said, right? So at this point, when the police shows up and the detective shows up, she sees, kind of like sort of now why you shaving your hair, why you cutting your beard and stuff off. Yeah, he started doing those things to run, to be able to run, because he knew that that child was going to tell. Just having me delivering my son would tell it all. And now that I was from under his clenches, being with my grandparents, now you can't dictate what I say to these detectives. You can't dictate what I say to the police. You ain't got no control. You can't give me that look, like I better not do this, or are you gonna hurt my other siblings, or are you gonna do this to my mom? You not in my ear to tell me that anymore.
Mm, wow.
So he knew that morning when the phone call came that I was in labor, that his ride was over, that they're coming for me. And so I think for my mom, though, it didn't resonate until I told the truth a few years ago. Because when we locked up in that bedroom, I said to her, you had to know. No, he said this and he said that. Mom, you could not have all these years still believed that fabricated story. You just couldn't.
Mm,
And then to look at our children, her son and my son. What you mean? And it's my son who looks identical to him. My brother took my mother's features, but my son looks just like him. Yeah, exactly. I mean, identical. And that was all my grandmother needed to see.
Hmm.
That's all she needed to see. But I knew she believed me when I told her. It just
Right.
waited till I delivered and got the authorities involved. Yep.
Um, with the time that we have left here,
We're gonna have a part three.
well, with the time that
Because there's more to the story.
okay,
And it's more to where I'm at today in my life.
right. So,
Where I'm at today in my life. And how we gotta give God the glory.
hmm
When I say we gotta give God the glory, there were times when Levi was raping me or doing whatever it is he wanted to do. I used to say, why me?
hmm
And then I used to question because we raised up in the church, and I used to say, well, why is God allowing this to happen to me?
right.
What did I do to be punished like this? Everybody around me was having a childhood, going to the little girls' birthday parties or the little boys' birthday parties, going to school, having your friends, and doing what little kids do growing up. Because I made sure my kids had that.
hmm
And I used to sit back and watch my sons and my daughter do the little kid stuff.
I'm going to ask you a personal question. When 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 you had a daughter, and I asked you as a mother, were you overprotective? Were you
I
overprotective?
was I was through the roof. It was sad. When I had my boys, because after Eric was another son, and I was elated about all of my children. But nothing changed my world than when I had that bouncing baby girl. I watched her sleep. I watched her eat. Only I gave her a bath. I didn't allow people to keep her. I was hands on, ears wide open, eyes wide open, just a different sense of parenting
hmm
opened up in me. And her first child, my daughter's first child, is a boy. This is him. And I'm still that same way because I still feel like I'm having to protect my daughter. I cried for that type of protection as a little girl
Wow.
because when I used to go to school, I used to say, when I started stealing, Charles, when I started stealing, I was looking for that protection.
hmm
I was looking for that protection and never got it.
hmm
The man would let me come in the store and steal food just to eat because he thought I was just hungry, you
hmm
know? And I was, but not knowing I'm hungry because I'm feeding two.
hmm
But why wouldn't the police called on me, you know?
Right.
So I can get out of this nightmare that I was living. Why the teachers didn't notice me shutting down, you know?
Mm. Wow.
Why didn't it see I would sit in the classroom and stare off into space?
When they came and arrested him and arrested your mother, what was the first words or conversation you had with her? after she had been arrested.
I didn't have it. I didn't. You got to realize I went from the hospital to foster care.
What? But well, well, then let me ask you like this right here. What happened to her? And because she's pregnant at the time, right? Right.
They let her go. They let her go. She just went through the process because it was child neglect.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep. Pleaded her case.
and so when did you finally see her after you went into foster care?
Um,
And what was
yeah,
said
when we
between the
started
two?
going to court, when they started bringing me to court, juvenile, because I went from the hospital to the juvenile detention, and then from there immediately to foster care just to find me a placement. And because those my grandparents were just my maternal grandparents, but now the court system done got involved,
Hmm.
so they can't take me from my grandparents, but they could take me from my mom
Hmm.
because I was still a minor. And so that's why I went through those channels. But yeah,
No, but I guess what I'm asking is, did she say anything at any point about
no.
anything?
See, you remember, my mom's not. She wasn't the. And not only was she not boisterous, but she wasn't even apologetic about it. Like taking ownership for him
Right.
for
That's what I
what
was.
he
Yeah.
did.
That's what I was trying to.
No, no, no.
Yeah.
Not even taking ownership to say, even if you just say, "Well, I didn't know." Nothing. Nothing. And
And
even when I exposed it to my son and my brother and my daughter, because she was there, when I even told them, she was angry with me for sharing the truth with them.
well,
So
I no
this
no
is
I
how I know she
right.
knew all along and
Well,
just protected.
right. And I say that to say that fits her personality because she never wanted to take ownership, and it's almost like there's no one. She, and this is that's not my feel, but it's almost like like there isn't her place for responsibility. And so
Yeah.
whatever that is and how she sees herself in the situation is if though she never had the ability to control some of this and the outcome. That's
Hmm.
just me. And
Well, and she didn't have any control. I can tell you that she had no control, because he was very controlling. He had us all, under his thumb. Just whatever he said is what went.
well, that's what I mean by her and her personality not being
Hmm.
able to stand up and be herself for herself is what I'm saying. Because
Right.
that wasn't her
Hmm.
personality. Be, um, and that's probably why he picked her because of her personality is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because as a man, I can understand that part. Now, some of it,
Yeah.
I know how to stay in my lane when it comes to being a man and a woman. I understand so
Right.
I understand his mindset. I understand how he process stuff. So that part
Hmm.
I understand. But I'm speaking in the terms of just because there's somebody else that he wouldn't have been able to get away with that different type of
That's
woman,
right.
different type of
That's correct.
different type of
That is
personality,
correct.
right? Yeah.
So it's funny that you said that because even with my daughter,
Hmm.
after her father
Hmm.
and I divorced, anybody that came into my life, they knew, they knew in the door the relationship between me and my children.
Let me ask you this. I don't know if I asked you this the first. No, I don't think I did. I'll make it a two-part question. How did you start seeing men, and when did you, or if did you learn to trust men and their behavior and who we are? How did, I mean, I don't know if we got enough time, but
We don't have enough time. That's why it will be a part three or maybe a part four. Because I could tell you this: I was not, I was not open.
hmm
You got to realize that I went through multiple relationships because I didn't know how to be in one.
hmm Well,
So I was
yeah,
raised
that's why
very
I asked the
protective.
question,
Yeah,
cause I know you got to be like, Ugh, you know, when-
yeah. I didn't know how to be in one. I was very angry for a very long time. I was very angry. I took it out on men. So I was a fighter.
mhm,
If you said the wrong thing to me, I wanted to fight. If you raised your hand at me, we did fight. If you raised your voice at me, it was a trigger. So I had a lot of triggers going on in my growing up in my young adulthood that men didn't know about what had happened to me.
mhm,
And so, yeah, I didn't talk about it at first, but men never understood why my anger was what it was.
yeah, I can only imagine you, and I'm saying it this way because this is the only way I know how to say it. If I don't know, and let's
Yeah,
just say I met Sharon, and I want to talk with Sharon and da 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 da, you would have been a tough person to date. Like, oh my God, like what, what's wrong with this girl? Like what the heck wrong with
yeah,
her? You know, you
yeah.
know, yeah, yeah. So that part I get, you know, because
So
there's,
no, it was not easy. It was not easy. And to be honest with you, Charles, I don't trust. That's the one curse that still lingers. I put my faith now all solely in God because I'm still here. I
right.
went through so much. I went through so much that I've been on my deathbed. That childhood trauma put me on my deathbed. I developed epileptic seizures, grand mal seizures, for about 17 years. And so, just from how he used to molest me and beat me, or the head trauma, you know, grabbing me by my throat, hitting me in the head, and things like that, I started developing seizures. And, for many years, I couldn't watch television, I couldn't watch certain things on TV. Those were triggers. And if I was in a relationship with somebody, I took it out on them. I took it out on them. Um, I didn't know how to talk uh, to a man because I always talked with aggression. I always talked with anger. I always talked with uh, trying to protect myself.
Yeah, right.
And so, yeah, and I missed out on a couple of good men, because my defense stayed up all the time. And if you said the wrong thing or if you reacted the wrong way, I saw you as Levi. So what did I always try to do? I always tried to hurt Levi.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I tried to kill Levi at
Mhm,
one time,
mhm,
you know?
mhm.
So somebody else named that wasn't Levi took the brunt of that punishment,
Right.
you know? I tried to run over Levi. You get what I'm saying? I tried to shoot Levi. so, so I'm just telling you that childhood trauma needs to be addressed in your childhood because when you leave that trauma untouched or you put a band-aid on it, that thing festers. It
Well,
grows.
right. So no,
So
no, I'm not going. I'm trying not to make a joke out of it, but I'm just gonna say I hope you didn't run into another guy by the name of Levi, you know, while you was here on this earth, because I would have been like, oh my God, Levi, It's like, oh.
I'm gonna make you laugh, and only you're gonna understand this. I received a resident last week, and his name is Levi. But this tells you though how I'm healed.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Because had that have been 10, 15 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
a Levi wouldn't even been able to be in the room with me.
Right. Well,
Uh,
yeah.
uh,
That's what I was saying. Right. Yeah.
no, I'm healed, and that's why I say there's gonna be a part three because they gotta know the journey that I've been on, and they gotta know what God has done. But we gotta have a segment to talk about when did I get there?
Right. Mm-hmm.
It
Right.
was in prison.
Mm. Right. Yeah. Then we need to talk about that. Going
Yeah.
going.
Because that right there is a segment all by itself. And then they're gonna start seeing through my testimony how God manifested himself to me
Mm-hmm.
at a time where I thought it couldn't get no worse
Mm-hmm. Well, see.
than being molested. You know what I'm saying?
All right. Well, we got to throw the T's out there because how long were you in prison?
I was sentenced to 20 years.
You was sent. Yeah. Right. Mm. So,
I did 5.
so that's the T's, people. So you have to come back and tell us, so you can listen to what she is talking about, how she ended up in prison, and
Yes.
and the good side of her going to
Hmm.
prison, which is
The
part
best
of.
5 years of my life.
Right. Yeah. So.
The best five
Right.
years of my life was spent in prison,
Right.
in one of the worst female prisons in the state of Florida.
Right.
The
Right.
worst.
Right. Wow.
And you ask yourself, how could you be in the worst prison for women in the state of Florida and spend the best 5 years of my life
Mm. See,
in prison?
and you can't get a better tease than that, people. And so we're gonna ask you to come back for part three and break all of that down. And
Yes.
so I I want you to. And by the way, I want you to see now that is a true mother right there. See that is a true grandmother right there. That's a true grandmother.
Yes.
By the way, you tell your daughter that she got a good baby.
Yeah, he's a good one.
Yeah, I'm serious. I grew up with a lot of babies in the house, and so people would be surprised that whether or not you had to change them, whether or not now this is me growing up, whether or not you had to change them, whether or not you had to
Hmm.
babysit them, whether or not you had to do exactly what you're doing, and you know how you put them on that leg and you start shaking that leg, you know, and I grew up in the era where you had to wash the diapers, you know,
Yeah,
that era,
I did too.
yeah,
I did too.
yeah, where yeah, where you had to wash the diapers and test the milk and see if it was warm enough, the formula and all.
Yeah,
It grew up in all of that.
on the back of the
Yeah, oh yeah,
wrist.
yeah, 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 yeah. So, uh, boy, that I think at one time, I think there were about between 5 and 6 babies in the house. At one
Wow.
time, you know. So, and then what was funny was it, and I ended here. There was the infant, and then there was the as they were had you had like a 2-year old, you had like a 4-year
Stair
old,
steps.
right, right,
Stair
right.
steps.
And so what was funny was there was one old enough that he was still young, and there was one that was talking. I couldn't understand one word what was being said, but then you turn to the, the older one and say, "What did he just say?" And they would tell you verbatim this sentence that I couldn't understand. And then what did the baby say? And it tell you exactly what what the child said. And you're like, okay.
Yeah.
That was the funniest thing to me.
Yeah.
you know, but that was long time ago because all of them now is but yeah, that was when I was a kid. The first baby came into the house when I was 12. When I was yeah,
Wow.
when I was my my sister, my older sister had Kim when I was in 6th grade. Yeah, and then after that, my other sisters and that and yeah. So I grew up being a babysitter, doing exactly that.
Yeah.
you know,
I
but
definitely, I definitely grew up being the babysitter.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, but thank you again for taking
Part
the time.
three.
Yeah, again, and uh, blessings to you, and thank you for taking the time to come on the journey 2020.
Absolutely.
All right, that is Miss Sharon Driver. Stay tuned for part three. A lot of people were asking um, about when she was going to come back on, and so for part two, happy that she took the time to do that as well. One of the things that she talked about and that she um, reminded me of was that I had a friend who had a sister, and the sister was raped at a very young age. She was raped at a very young age, and she she turned to women. She started dating women um, because she didn't trust men. It was too painful, and she thought men were just evil. Um, she basically adopted her daughter's, I mean her sister's daughter when the daughter was born because she was raped and the guy impregnated her. And at 2 weeks old, she adopted her sister's daughter and raised it. Last time I talked with her, which was years ago, the daughter was nine at the time. But she was telling me the story about her sister, and she kept saying to her father, "Where were you? Where were you? Why wasn't you there to protect me?" Because she was so traumatized by what had happened to her, and that she just was, I guess, just totally turned off by men because of that encounter, and I guess maybe she needed some counseling. Well, obviously she needed some counseling. Um, so, uh, the tragic, and I would always say when I spoke earlier about when I was there on that session with the women on Friday nights, I would just always say it's amazing the stuff that we have to come up out of and become semi-normal and whatever that is. But this is the Journey 2020. I'm Charles Morris, where we come to you every Monday at 7 p.m. Not sure if your team won the Super Bowl. Happy President's Day, and so on and so forth. Journey 2020, um, where we have been coming to you since 2013 with the idea and the concept of Dr. John Robinson, clinical psychologist here in the Orlando area. Um, talk with him. He people who don't know, he's been on the weather for a while now, but he said that he's getting better and that he will come back and do a show sometime real soon. Again, for questions, comments, and concern, you can always hit us up with it and email. Would love to hear from you. Questions, comments, or concerns. You know, I'm Charles Morris, and remember to stay tuned for part three of Miss Sharon Driver as she talks about how 5 years of prison was one of the best things that ever happened to her in reference to her life and her journey and where she is and what she's doing now. So, with that being said, everybody, The word comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of the Lord. Everybody, enjoy the rest of the week, and you be blessed.